afternoon, beautiful afternoon it is. I'm the Executive Director of AVA and Art Center, and it is such a pleasure for me to welcome you all, and specifically to welcome Greg Gorman to talk about his wonderful exhibition here, and also to welcome Nadia, his wonderful wife. Greg and Nadia have been connected with AVA for many, many years. And I'm just going to talk to you personally, from a personal point of view, and then Margaret Jacobs, our Director of Exhibitions, put this all together, will give a more formal introduction to Greg. But you have, I've known you for many, many years, for almost as many years as I have been associated with AVA, which is nearly 30 years.
Yes, that's right.
And though you are renowned as a stained glass artist, your career as a painter is quite significant. And I was very, very moved when I saw your statement, read your statement for your exhibition. It came as a complete surprise for me. I think it actually a few tears trickled out. It said when you dedicated your exhibition to the memory of your friend and colleague and fellow painter Clifford West, my late husband. It moved me very deeply. So then I went back and looked through some old newsletters. That I have this pride because we didn't have digital files at that time. It goes way back. In 1994, there was an exhibition here called 7 Separate Paths. There were 7 artists who had studied with my husband Clifford for a couple of years. They had gone to critique groups with him, weekly critique groups. But then they had found that they needed and wanted to challenge themselves beyond these weekly critique groups. And they asked Clifford for guidance beyond that regular critique format. So I'm just going to read something of what I must have written at that time. So the group that subsequently emerged gave these 7 artists the opportunity to study and discuss their work in depth. Despite their differences, and their artists were in remarkably different modes of expression. Despite their differences, the group became bonded through a common interest and point of departure. And this, I think, is quite wonderful. An empty rectangular surface, the canvas, and simple time-honored tools, paints and brushes. With these tools, they have created an amalgamation of personal experiences and visual stimuli of the observed world. And then it goes on and on to describe it. And I remember that exhibition so well, and your work was so strong and powerful and beautiful, and how you have kept your involvement with AVA. You have exhibited in so many different shows over the years. Of course, most recently you have been part of significant glass shows that we have had. But for years you have participated in group shows, jury shows, with your paintings, and it's always something new and fascinating to see. And I just want to thank you for your commitment to the arts, for just keeping on, starting with that rectangular, that empty, blank canvas, and having your paints and your brushes in hand, and for providing us with such beautiful visual experiences. So thank you, Greg. Margaret Jacobs will now give you a little more formal introduction. But again, thank you also for dedicating your exhibition to Clifford's work. Thanks.
Hi everyone, I'm Margaret Jacobs. I'm AVA's Director of Exhibitions. I'm going to introduce Greg. Greg Gorman of Lime Center, New Hampshire is a stained glass mosaic artist and painter. He studied various techniques of glass painting and design at several different schools and studios, including the Reinvention School in Beaconsfield, England, Lamb Studios in Northvale, New Jersey, Central School of Art in London, and Connick Associates in Boston, Massachusetts. Gorman assisted in the restoration of the windows of the cathedral in Brooklyn, New York, and the fabrication of windows at the Robinson College Chapel and the Cambridge University Great Dining Hall. Artists that were influential to him in his painting practice include Clifford B. West, John Piper, and Patrick Raintan. In 1984, Gorman founded the studio in Lime Center, New Hampshire, where he worked producing art panels, mosaics, and many large architectural windows for private residencies and religious institutions. Gorman's paintings are based on traditional still life and landscapes. He is interested in the presentation of paintings in these classical arrangements, altering the familiar and the expected in a way that brings the viewer into a new and hopefully dynamic rediscovery of the potential that is possible in these themes. Please join me in welcoming Green.
All right, guys, listen, thank you for all showing up. It's great. We're all here to support AVA, and that's the beginning and the end of what these things are. Thank you for coming to support me, but AVA is what it's all about. Again, it's a worthy institution to have your support. And in particular, I want to thank Margaret for arranging this show. She curated it, she hung it, she put the paintings in their place, and I think she did a fabulous job. I'm extremely happy. She made it look good. So thank you, Margaret, for that. One of the things I want to talk about here simply are influences in painting. I mean, mine, certainly, but in general, for any of you who are artists in anything, really. What influences us is extremely important. And where those influences come from, you never know. Case in point, Bente talked about my relationship with Clifford West. And just start with a little story about Clifford and I. I was helping Clifford do some of the painting over at Three Tomatoes. And in fact, that little wine room that's in the back. And so we had some of us in the painting group helping him out. I had my day with Clifford. And this was after we'd been painting together and having our group together. So we started to know each other pretty well. And so we were standing on the little scaffolding there, doing that painting over at Three Tomatoes. And Clifford just threw out a question asking me, what was the first thing that got me interested in painting? So I thought for a second, well, two things in Detroit, and Clifford had a long history. At the Detroit Institute of Arts, there's, you walk into the Detroit Institute of Arts, and there's a very nice sized room about this side. Diego Rivera had done a fantastic set of murals around with a little fountain in the center. When I was a kid, my parents would take me to the museum, and they had trouble getting me out of it. I tell you, it is an unbelievable thing. And if you want to see a very, very nice representation of Rivera's mural work, Google up Detroit Institute of Arts, and the vestibule, I suppose you'd call it. And it's really a treat. It reminds me a lot of the Orozco murals at the Baker Library. But anyway, do yourself a treat and do look that up. So I mentioned that to Clifford, and I mentioned the bank that our dentist was in. So we go into Detroit to go see the dentist. We go through this bank, and there was beautiful murals on the ceiling and halfway down the wall. And I said, well, what building was that? He said, well, I told him the building. And he was quiet for a good little period of time. And then he looked at me and he said, I made those. And I said, oh, yikes. So you never know where it's coming from. These things were very much things that caught my attention at an early age, and no doubt drove my ongoing interest in painting. So influences. I've been thinking a lot about influences. Paint and think. And started thinking about the derivative. I mean, is anything that any of us do in the arts original? And it's hard to say, you know. I read a review, I think in the New York Times, or maybe it was the New Yorker, where one of the critics was basically saying that painting had dropped out of the hierarchy of the fine arts, that no one is doing anything original, everything is derivative, and pretty badly so, or people are floundering, one or the other, trying to find a new way. So I got to thinking about that. And I started thinking about my influences beyond Clifford and Diego Rivera. And the more and more I looked at paintings, the more drawn I was to the turn of the century, 1900s to 1930s. These are the paintings that again and again drew my attention. And this was a very, very exciting period of time, this turn of the century. The salons of Paris and in London, they had a grip on painting. You didn't do anything, you didn't show anything without going through the committees, and a very formal thing. Your artwork had to be of a certain style, and then boom, all of a sudden people like Picasso and Juan Green, you name it, they came exploding on the scene. And things haven't been the same since, that's for sure. I mean, this was the birth in a very, very quick progression, and sometimes, often overlapping. It was the birth of Cubism, Fauvism, Expressionism, the Die Broek, the Blue Rider, the Bloomsbury group, Futurism. All these things just were happening and exploding and disappearing very quickly. None of them lasted very long. They transitioned into something else. People were taking this and running in that direction with it, taking that and going off over here. It was a really exciting but short period of time. And then quickly on to Impressionism, then 1940s, 1950s, and then things started getting a little muddled for some people. But there are some favorites of mine from that early 1900s. And one of the most influential for me is this group of Romanian and Hungarian painters. And they were from the school of painting Baia Mare, which is a region of Hungary, which now belongs to Romania. And this was a village, a group of villages. And artists were leaving the cities and going out to the country, living, painting, making communal communities, doing lots of interesting things, but mostly taking the influences that they had found in Paris, mostly, and bringing them to the countryside and putting their own personal twists on these new movements. And actually, Nadia here has a little write-up of some of the groups I'm interested in, including this AVA, and some of the artists who I think were extremely interesting. And so do look these people up, if you're interested at all. A lot of these are pretty obscure, others are familiar, but each and every one have been really important to this journey, that's for sure. So people like Juan Green. Juan Green did some very, very interesting explorations of cityscapes and still lifes using line, not quite as heavy as some of this, but he was starting to bring definition and strength to paintings through the use of the line. And he never drew a straight line in his life. You look at some of his cityscapes in Paris, and he's beautiful. You'll recognize the buildings and the art. You're in Paris. But each line's got a little curve. And it just keeps these paintings alive. It keeps your mind jumping. You're not sure exactly what you see there, but something's a little bit off. But it's in harmony, it's in balance. And this guy influenced whatever it is I've done here an awful lot. A Hungarian painter by the name of Sándor Ziffer. He was one of the big founders of this Bayamari group. And do yourself a treat and look this guy up. His use of color and line and just the organic nature of what it is that he painted is just spectacular. And he's not the only one. Anyway. So anybody who's doing sculpture, painting, whatever, I think this period of time is fantastic. And as far as the derivative goes, as far as copying people or whatever, if you're copying, obviously, you're not doing the right thing. But I think that if we're looking for influences, if we're looking for direction as painters in particular, and some sculptors, you can do a lot worse than to go back to this period of time and start looking with new eyes at just simply cubism, for instance. Now, a lot of people have cubism roll their eyes, and spend your time with it, look at it, tear it apart, rediscover it, reinvent it, take this thing that had such a short, intense period of time and do something with it. Move it, twist it, do 180 degree, whatever, make it your own. Futurism, Fauvism, you can do the same thing. It's a rich field that we could be planted in and bringing ideas from. It's like all these things came at once, they flourished, everybody got interested in something else, and they started going in different directions. But these things are there, I think, for us to look at, to give it a twist, make it your own, and do something new. And if we call that derivative, that's what it is. But it's no ends of pleasure, no ends of a good time when you do something like that. So we discover, reinvent, reinterpret, and find the essence. Make it your own. So, what I wanted to do after looking and looking and looking was to have my paintings be images of familiar things. So that's why I chose a lot of still lifes. It's such a classical motif for painting. And people here that are still life, yawn. Well, you can, again, it's that reinvention. I wanted to paint these things that would make them new to most people, who were looking at these for the first time. And hopefully, or what I intended was that none of these paintings are what you would call static. Okay, these I intended, tried hard, to even though quiet paintings, to have a lot of movement in them. And using line and using color. I wanted energy in these paintings that seemed like they were going to explode out of the frame. I didn't want anything to stay in the frame at all. I want these things pouring out the side and the top. And to make your eye move, to make you see things in a different way, not to be bored with one quick look and move on. So I hope I was able to do that. Anyway, what's important for this though to work, I think, and I tried as hard as I could, to bring a sense of balance and harmony on one hand, and chaos and color on the other. And if you can make that balance with anything, then I think you've done a good thing. The human mind, I think, craves order, and another part of it wants chaos. It's that thing that we're fighting all the time, for the balance in our life, balance in our art. And I tried really hard, semi-consciously, in each of these, to bring those two dynamics to bear. And if I did, fine, and if I didn't, well, I had fun trying. So, anyway. So it's that thing, that balance between the instinctual and the planned. For me, when I'm laying out a painting, something like this, start with obviously a white canvas, put a colored ground in it, and start drawing with charcoal. And it's that sort of that same kind of attitude, I suppose, that the abstract expressionists were bringing. If you've seen any photographs or little videos of them, V. Krasner, Pollock, and those people, starting a painting. It's a pretty much an unconscious process of making the mind blank and just begin an action drawing, I suppose you could call it. And after that, it just takes off by itself. It has, forget planning, forget preconceptions. The thing becomes a life of its own and takes you in directions that you never even thought existed. So, this is why I love painting. It's something that I don't have to sit down and have a photographic image in my mind of something that I want to do. I think that's a recipe for disaster. This idea of inventing kind of half-conscious process, for me, is fun at painting. And it works or it doesn't. Not everything's a masterpiece, that's for sure. But there's no end of fun in trying to balance all of these things, in a way that's, what else can I tell you about these? The use of the black line. I spoke about that a little bit. I make stained glass, I make mosaics, and occasionally somebody says, "Oh, yeah, stained glass." Okay. I see why they say that, obviously. But even with stained glass, and even with mosaic, that black line is more than just something that divides things or provides structure. It does provide structure. It does divide color, but it divides color for a purpose. In that, I think with the use of a line, whether it's black or whatever, but it all serves the function of separating, of allowing colors that you would never think would blend together, to live together. I think if you took some of these colors and just tried to blend the edges, it would be a disaster. But the black line gives movement. First of all, it gives movement. And that's the thing that explodes off the canvas, I hope. And it lets you do color combinations that I think you couldn't get away with otherwise. So there's part of the order, there's part of the balance, there's part of the harmony, there's part of the chaos. And if I did it right, there's harmony, balance. That's what we strive for. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But no one's a fun. Thank you, Clifford. So, anything about the paintings, technique? Happy to hear what you don't like.
Could you talk a little bit about your use of colored lines in the Tuscan landscape painting?
Yeah, I thought that, and you'll see, I mean, this, for instance, this painting is pretty much all dark line. Although I've got some gray in it and whatever, but it reads dark line. And then I think this painting came next, and I thought the black line was too much for that city structure thing, which, by the way, is sort of the death of the Lower East Side in New York City. They're tearing down the old buildings that have been there forever. And all this stuff is rising up from behind it. So the landscape ends up being an extension of that idea of using the line to move the eye and to separate some of that color. And I just wanted to see what something other than a black line could do. And my first little forays into that I liked, so I just kept pushing and experimenting. I got one at home that I pushed too far. Didn't make the cut. So too much of a good thing can do that. But no, it's just a process of giving it a try and seeing what happens. And where these ideas come from are the spur of the moment things. Is that?
Yeah. Just curious.
And also, I think that the various colors there help keep an organic quality to that landscape. Other than the black lines, which I think work really well for the architectural scenes. I think the use of the black line in that second painting probably came really close to making me the happiest. Not that the others didn't. But, I thought that did everything I wanted it to do. I said, there's nothing about static paintings here.
It's always lovely to be at AVA. It's just particularly lovely to be in this room with your paintings. It's just wonderful. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
I really like the story that you started out with about things you noticed as a young artist. How old were you when you were walking through the bank and seeing that painting?
Oh, just
tiny.
grade school.
Grade school, yeah. So I work with young artists, and I just love that you like honoring that memory and bringing that forward. For us to remember, how early it starts, or why,
It can.
and where our parents drag us, that ends up mattering. So I've seen your mosaic and glass work, and I've never seen your paintings before. And I guess I just wanted to ask you, are you doing one or the other? Are you in your painting periods or your glass periods, or one is paying the bills and one is joy, or they're all joy? Or...
Well, yeah, these paintings all came like a 2-year period or less, and there were several more that were done at the same time. So I had 2 years, or a year and a half or so, that the stained glass work was just sort of chugging along, and I was very happy with that, because I've been doing this forever. But before that, and now that the work has started coming in again, it's a balance. Sometimes you paint, sometimes you're working on the glass and you get sick of the glass, and so you go upstairs and paint. It's a nice balance of things. These glass pieces really are just extensions of the paintings, and the paintings are extensions of those. I think it's that same process of painting as it is for designing for glass. There's some kinds of glass. A lot of my work is religious, and it's where they keep the glass. So I do a lot of church work. And that has, more of a given motif that you're, within parameters that you have to follow. You can still have a lot of fun with it, but the door is a little tighter. But I love doing the glass. That's my glass. It's different and it's the same. So, yeah, you can balance those things. You don't have to do just one or the other. It's part of the balanced life, I think. If you
I don't know anything about that, but I heard about it.
I recommend it. Yeah. You have
Do you work from a still life? Are these?
No. I've seen more still lifes than I need to. So,
You set something up.
just start drawing and something comes out. And we all know what still lifes are about. It's an easy thing to visualize. And I think once you start, your third one, you're just on the roll.
So like this, there, that one, the blue, to do with the white. They just go for the
Hard to explain. I like not painting consciously, if that makes any sense. I can sit down and say, okay, I'm still life. But once your hand starts moving with the charcoal, boy, you're off. Something else is happening in that logical mind. If you're not in that space where you feel you have to make a very specific pre-thought idea of what this painting is going to look like, and that gives you lots of freedom to.
Well, that is in more color. Like this one here, that one, and that one seem to be similar in
Yes.
color. And then the white, and then in some of these as well. So your palette is
I wish I could remember, what would be interesting for you maybe is to know the progression, and boy, I've lost that by now. Yeah, but there is a progression when you're doing a series. And if you set yourself up to do 6 paintings of a still life, boy, number 1 and number 6 are going to be different. And especially if you're just, inventing on the run. And you probably
you
have.
wake up and draw a green?
No. I do not remember my dreams. So, probably just
Something like
no, the drawing just comes from years of drawing and doodling and feeling comfortable with it. And it's something you can teach yourself to do.
Yeah, no, sometimes, I mean, I feel like, I mean, for myself, I'll have an image that I'll look at, I'll try to work it out.
Absolutely.
It's not really an image that I think you. So,
Yes. A notebook of those would be, sketchbook of those would be very interesting. Yes.
I know from having seen a lot of interviews with writers, they all seem to have kind of a routine that suits their productivity best. Do you have something that works best for you? Writers will say, well, I'm going to sit down for 4 hours a day, or I'm going to write so many thousand words a day.
No, I don't know.
Is there anything you find yourself in the morning, afternoon? Because like my time of day is afternoons and evenings.
Right.
Mornings I'm not good for much. Do you find yourself in any kind of a
Yeah, not so much for painting, but boy, there are a lot of things I shouldn't try to do in the morning.
yeah?
It's, yeah, I know what you mean. But for painting, I don't know, it's like a separate category, and you're grateful for whatever time you've got.
Right, so if
So
something's
you're
working,
trying-
you just stick with it.
Yeah.
And if it's not, you maybe just set that down and go on to something else.
Yeah.
And kind of a second question is, and one that's about a lot of museums and galleries. I've been into places where people have art for sale. How do you determine what you want to ask for your work?
That's the worst, that really is. I have the same problem with glass. I mean, how much, what's this worth? You can't put in hourly. It took me 3.6 hours, so this is what it's going to cost. No, ask anybody. It's one of the worst things to try to figure out. You can certainly ask too much, and if you make it cheap, then people don't value it. They don't look at it as serious. That affects people. I personally think that art should be incredibly affordable. Some of these, I feel guilty for the prices I have on them. Other people, take a walk around, prices are much different. But it's not so much how you value what it is that you do, because I would argue I value my process and what I produce pretty high, but I don't expect you to pay for it. So yeah, if we can make art affordable, why not? I'm not trying to send my kid to Harvard, from painting. So let's.
But as you've been working as an established artist for years, I'm sure you have a much better idea. Like if a newer artist is starting out, they're not going to have the concept of what they can get.
No, it's hard to figure that out. I suppose the more you look, the more you see, and then you get a sense, what kind of where the middle is, and you can judge yourself against what you've seen. You get a good idea.
I'd like to just say something to that. Every year we have an exhibition of work by high school students from the Upper Valley. And there are some wonderful, wonderful works. And last year in particular, I noticed that they were not for sale, and we had encouraged them to learn about pricing works and, that the galleries take commission and the whole thing. Not for sale, not for sale, not for sale. So, and then there was one price of $10,000. But I talked to them about it, and I talked to them, I understand they're not for sale, it's precious to them. But I said, if you are thinking about a career as an artist, you better learn how to let go of your work, because that's your profession. And they get kind of shocked when I talk to them. I talk, affectionately and all of that. And afterwards, they were a few people changed. And then changed their price tag from not for sales to $60 and $80 and so on and so on. But if that's your profession.
Yeah, that's right. Well,
I cried at times when Clifford just sold some work. I said, oh, I'm so close to them, I'm so blah, blah, blah. And he said, just stop it. It's totally unsentimental, you know. This is my profession. Get with it. So he's taking a photograph of the document and we talked to the $10,000 guy, and you know, yeah, you value it very much, but maybe you should adjust it a little bit. So these are wonderful learning opportunities for young people, but for people like you who are established artists, it remains a struggle, really.
And it seems like you have to build some wiggle room in there, because I was looking at a painting down one of the Lowell galleries a while back.
Mhm.
And I was very impressed by it. It was a pretty good size. I don't know the exact dimensions of this. And I asked the lady, I said, how much you asking for it? She said, $5,000. So I'm staring at it and I'm thinking it over. And I'm re-examining it and looked at some of her other artwork, and I thought it was the best piece. So we stood together for a few minutes and I didn't say anything. She goes, well, $4,000. And I'm thinking, well, you know, by the end of the afternoon, if I really wanted to take it home with me, maybe I could have given her 20. I don't know. I'm not really in that business, but it was a piece that I liked. And I had a little money. But it seems like you also have to maybe build some room into it to work like that.
I think everybody's got their own needs and their own way of dealing with it. And, if you're lucky enough to be with a gallery, well, that's taken care of for you.
Mhm.
I mean, they have their own sense of worth,
Right.
and what it takes to maintain the business, and you're happy to participate. That's for sure.
And let me tell you something, if you come here and if there's a work of art you really love, and you think it's the price too high, we won't negotiate. But we talk to you about paying it over time, making it affordable for you in a reasonable installment, because we don't want to undercut the artist.
Right, it's not a flea market either.
No.
Some people.
But there is a mixture here, yes, of people who do this for a living. I mean,
Yeah, exactly.
and people like me who have other sources of income that doesn't love it, and can't not do it. And so there's, yeah, you know, there's the people who do it from actually living.
That's a
Wow, you know,
serious business.
it's really a business, and you do have to be pretty hard-headed and trying to balance, you know, what's affordable and pushing it up. And it's quite a dance.
And the cost of the supplies, cost of the art supplies, is very real cost. I wanted to ask you a question because as from here where I see, you know, there is one still lives and there's the streetscapes, landscapes, it's all nature. And then on the other side we have this couple. And then painted in her painting. I think you should take it off the wall and walk down and talk about it. No problem.
Well, yeah, I could show it. Sure.
Yes. Because. Oh,
So yeah, this is different.
It's just different.
So this was what I call the odd couple when it comes to everything else here. So Margaret made a wonderful balancing of these two ideas. Same time I'm showing this third one. And I was happy that she included these guys. You know, I mean, it's not much of an, you know, not much of a jump to say that this is connected. All these things are connected with all those principles that I was talking about, unconscious principles. This came really quickly, and in fact, what I was doing, I had a white canvas, and I was putting a gray ground on it, and then going to paint over that. I hadn't figured out what yet. And how often do you get a chance to paint anything on a big canvas? So I always take that ground with a brush and start a painting. Okay? And then end up usually 99 times out of 100 just covering the whole thing with the ground eventually. But having that opportunity and the fun and the challenge of just jumping in and doing something with it before you completely slather it. And so throwing the brush around and boom, these guys just immediately showed up, just from the marks that I was making. And boom, eyes, nose, lip, red. And sometimes it happens like that. Sometimes it's just like an apple falling out of the tree in your hand. And other times, it's a struggle. And you're always happy to see these happy accidents, whatever you want to call them. I think in the future, I'm going to do more figurative work. I'm going to do more landscapes. I think I've explored the still life idea enough for a while. Just keep moving. And
I still think the lines in your portrait, though, they relate to your other paintings very much.
Yeah, it was done in the middle of this.
Yeah.
So, you're going to have echoes of things going back and forth. Sure. Absolutely.
Wayne has a question. Greg?
Hi, thank you. I'm going to pay you a compliment and then ask a question. I'm probably one of those who is more prejudiced against still life than I realized. So I'm sitting here thinking about it, feeling a little guilty. But I do want to say that last one on the right, which is on the announcement, I believe,
Right.
I looked at that and I thought, I want to see more of this guy's stuff. It really caught my attention.
Okay.
And I'm not even sure why, but there's something about that got me right away. This wall interests me more. The two on the left and the one on the far right are the three that do that the most. I really like them. I wanted to ask you, saying those last two, do those designs happen in another medium first? Do you work it out on paper? Do you see that arrangement of rectangles some other way before you paint them?
Yeah, I can say in a couple of ways. I'm a big fan of Mongrel's.
Right.
And, his grids, I've always liked. I always thought that they were underappreciated. So, that's a little part of it. People who point out my involvement with mosaic and stained glass would say, okay, there you go. And obviously, I'm bringing the power of the black separating line to painting because, it's a tool. It's not, just something you write on with. It is a tool. It's a movement. It can be color. Directs the eye. It makes it makes the shape. And it moves you around the painting. And those, I hope they do the same thing. But mostly, I think it allows you to do coloring that's what I consider to be meant to be exciting combinations of colors that you just probably couldn't do, except in one of those loosey-goosey abstract ways, and then I don't think you put those colors together. You try to blend them. So this is a way to experiment with color, just color blocks.
I like what you said about trying to, I'm paraphrasing, find balance and harmony, but at the same time have enough chaos to make it interesting. And I had an instructor in art school who was only a few years older than I at the time, but we stayed in touch throughout life. And something I threw his way one time, there was a whole lot of trouble back then, but we keep talking about it. He said, "What are you trying to do here?" I welded all this stuff together. He said, "What are you trying to do here?" And I said, "I'm trying to freeze chaos." And he just thought that was ridiculous. And all of our lives, we've been making jokes about it until not too long ago. He said, you know, I've decided you might have something there. And I think you've got it. I mean, maybe that's what I like about those. It looks like chaos is happening and you froze it.
Controlled chaos?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's, boy, you know, if I was successful doing that, wow. Thank you. But yeah, I mean, that's the idea. And to make those balances, to be aware. I don't even know if it's conscious awareness, but be aware of balances and harmonies and this chaos and chaos. My partner, Kathy Chapman here, and myself, my glass partner, we did a set of windows at St. Thomas's Episcopal Church in Hanover. That's that stone church on Wheel Street, Episcopal Church. And so we did the big windows in the back. And so there were 4 large windows and a big rose in there. The side of the building that faces the river. So it's St. Thomas and Mary Magdalene figures in those 4 canals. And what was interesting, I was doing some reading about the style that I wanted to do, the formal, what they call English cathedral style. And it's fascinating about the philosophy behind this, because if you look at that window, you maybe took a black and white picture, but you would see there's a geometric structure going all the way through it, making circles and ovals and diamonds, and a border which has a very specific geometry to it, mirrored images back and forth. And this idea of chaos and harmony came to me from a description of this English cathedral style, in which this writer said that the mind wants the balance between chaos and order. And so you have the order of the geometry, and all throughout let's call it the chaos of the color. Okay? And it feeds that style of window just feeds the need to have those 2 things. And if you can hit them right, wow, you know, it really works. And people aren't even conscious that that's how they're seeing it. They're satisfied. Both sides of their mind are satisfied. Okay, by looking at this. I mean, my theory. Whatever.
I think you mentioned one of those lines, it's beginnings in New York City. And then I guess that's another reason, because the cities are falling apart. Beautiful, you know, and that I think that's what's going on in those 2 for me. Yeah. Something beautiful, you see it was beautiful, is it gonna, you know?
Yeah.
So I like those, thank you.
Yeah, cities are fun to paint. That's all that, especially in New York City, it's got all that dynamic building, and whether it's good or bad, I mean, they're tearing down their building, it is what it is, and nothing stays still, especially in New York City. So there's always going to be, you know, there's cranes up in the air, you know, forever. So, particularly right now. And then one of those in particular is just my reaction to what's happening, for instance, to the Lower East Side. You know, all these old tenement buildings, basically. Boom, putting up 16-story high-rise condos, $1.5 million bucks. That's what's replacing all the one bedroom. Yeah. So.
Well, controlled chaos. It sounds like you ought to go into a nursery school and.
I don't know how controlled that is. Yeah.
And just deal with what happens with little people and try to put it in the structure.
Oh, no. And that city is brutal for the little people. They have no power. Developers just do what they want.
But think of your grandchild. Think of the wonderful expressivity of these little people, and you let it unfold, and you try to put it into some kind of control. Right?
Yeah. Well, we're all trying to do that. You know, we constantly want to freeze things, which are unfreezable.
Yeah, exactly.
All the time.
And you have to let it find expression, and you have to try to strive all the time to put it into some kind of control.
Thank you.
Oh, great. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Discussion.
It was, I want to talk to you more about the Tuscan landscape afterwards. But,
Okay.
yes.